My name is Rhina Espaillat. I have the pleasure of doing a recording for Alex Pepple, and I'm going to begin with a poem called As She Tells It, which is a sestina, a form that I love. And I'm going to leave it up to the reader to determine who she is. It's not those early days I best remember, our first unworded oneness in the clearing prepared for us. The wound in his side that closed after God drew me out of him. The sword sealing as it divided. The sweet recalcitrant pull of him afterward that always felt like a return. The earth was always home in those days. Both of us remember how easily soil opened, unrecalcitrant, inventing the green flavors of the clearing for our delight. We hardly noticed the sword in the angel's hand, or how the gates were closed. I don't know when it was that something closed between us or why. I could not always run to God's call as he did to the sword of power sheathed in the voice I still remember. He went willing and joyful to the clearing, worked it to order. But I, recalcitrant with questions, brooding doubts, recalcitrant to law and season, even as they bound me, closed the core of me for good. Thought was my clearing. He named everything made, but did not always find things behind their names. Ceased to remember the words we were forbidden by the sword. Like things, we had been made. We had no sword. We played like children, learned recalcitrant as buried stones, those rules we kept. Remember this, beware of that. The gates were closed, the woods outside them dark. Searchlights always combing the sky, the borders of our clearing towered and sentried. The end of it, the clearing of his good name, as Adam called the sword of his confession and betrayal, his always unforgivable forgiveness, my recalcitrant pride because I did the thing that closed that brief first chapter. That's what I remember. Mind clearing itself free, recalcitrant words learning to be a sword, the garden closed, the dark, always ours, deeper than we remember. Here's a second poem called The Ballad of Sanysidro, and this one is a matter of history. This happened in my mother's hometown before she was even born, and I heard about it as a story from her. I tried to write it as a story, but clearly it didn't want to be a story, and I dreamed it one night as a poem. The Ballad of Sanysidro. In the village of Sanysidro, they are gathered for a death. A widow has called for her only son and begs with her failing breath, I have promised you to God, my boy. Oppose me not in this. Renounce the flesh and serve the cross and earn my parting kiss. Shaken body and soul, he hears his mother's final prayer, for body and soul and heart are bound to a maiden's raven hair, to a maiden's lips like a honeyed rose, and hands like an angel's nest. And although he nods and bows his head, as his mother is laid to rest, he longs to be on the silver cross that lies on a budding breast. A fortnight hence, by the river's edge, her steps are swift and light. But where are my lover's eyes, says she, for yours are not soft tonight. Farewell, says he, my only dear, for this is our final tryst, and if you weep, you must weep alone, for we must part unkissed. She weeps, and calls after him, but would she were alone, for one has followed her from town, whose heart is a burning stone, her only sister's husband, the herdsman Nicanor, who's watched her from under his sullen brows these 7 years and more. 7 long years to her sister wed, and his thoughts are grim and dark, for one sister's grown like a fat gray toad, but one is the morning lark. Let me pass, my sister's husband, for you know we are close kin. I cannot love my sister's man, nor lie with you in sin. Your love may shut me out, says he, but your body will let me in. He mounts her like a battlement. He leaves no gate untried. The owl drifts down and swoops to find what prey it was that cried, and lucky the skittering tiny mouse that knows a place to hide. Heaven that bends above them both is shining pure and clear. I shall not pray again, says she, for nothing up there can hear, can see, can feel for mouse or maid who cries aloud in fear. Sister, sister, draw me a bath, for tonight I slipped and fell. What fall is this that has left your eyes like the shaft of a poisoned well? Sister, sister, question me not, for a serpent has frightened me. What serpent is this that has left more wounds than the wounds of Calvary? Sister, the fall was your husband's fall, the serpent Nicanor. A curse on your face that has tempted my man until he could bear no more. Pray God you do not warm his seed and banish him from our door. He does not come for the harvest who did such fearful sowing. There are those who hint, they know not what. There are those who play at knowing. But after the town wears out the tale, the seasons forget his going. And what shall become of my boy and me since you've sent my man to wander? We will walk and walk on the points of spears until we've traveled yonder. We will make our peace as the poor must do, for the poor have scanty choices, and labor as one for our fatherless brood, till the choir forgets our voices, till our feet forget the dancing floor, and our breath how the world rejoices. Her daughter is meek as a small gray dove. She asks for nothing ever. But she's heard of the North where dollars grow and her teachers call her clever. Farewell, farewell, my mother, my aunt, my cousin who guides the plow. I go where dollars grow on trees to pull them down somehow. Farewell, dear child, we have watched for you. You must watch for your own self now. Fear not, my mother, my aunt, she writes. I am far from the honky-tonks. I have found me a room like a cloistered cell in a place they call El Bronx. I spend my nights with an open book, my days as a sick-room nurse. The dollars shall be for sending home and the pennies for my purse. In a Texas prison, 2,000 miles from where she tends the sick, there's a sullen man on death row the guards call Spanish Nick, who could tell a tale if he chose to tell, but will soon tell nothing more, for he's killed 3 men with a stolen gun while robbing a liquor store. In the village of Sanysidro, they are gathered for a death. The good old priest is babbling with every rasping breath of a maid alone by the river's edge, and somebody cursed by prayer, and somebody caught like a gasping fish in a mesh of raven hair, and wounds unhealed as the wounds of Christ on hands like an angel's nest, and somebody nailed to the silver cross that lies on a budding breast. I have a poem here that is titled The Jury. And the jury is a rather familiar group. And it's simply a poem in quatrains, and I hope that you enjoy it. The Jury. In a bare tree, 4 strangers gathered from afar slipped into talk as travelers do. First, Eagle said, "How strange they are, these creatures lately come to climb our cliffs, and spy upon our brood. They have no constancy, but drift from mood to mood. First wanton slaughter, and now zeal to build their hunted tribe again. I cannot fathom them at all. They are called men, said Pigeon, and I know them well. I've learned their secret. All they use from day to day to guide their steps is just their shoes. It's true, my friends. In new spiked boots, yesterday's farmer struts the street, turned killer, and tomorrow dies derelict with rag-bound feet. More out of sympathy than need, I gather their spilled crumbs to know toward what new grief their wayward shoes would have them go. And yet, said Sparrow, I have known some who would leave the lighted nest to scatter seed through razor winds for our sake, lest we hunger through December days. I've seen them fling their gaze above their comforts to pursue us with something like love. True, Vulture said, for they love me and have my welfare much in mind. In Leningrad, in Lebanon, men were most kind and nourished me with their own young. Vietnam, Verdun, Angola, Troy, Thermopylae. The love of men is my chief joy. Well, that's as may be, Eagle said, but they are feeble things at best. Condemned to winglessness, they creep in their own shadow, flight obsessed, a sad smudge upon the earth. Half willingly erased at last, we will possess our own again when they have passed. So that's the jury judging us, and I hope that their conversation does not come true. This poem is called Matinal, and you'll recognize my home city, what I call my home city, which is New York City, of course, because it takes place in a very familiar place. Matinal. 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 is how this journey goes. Caught in a stream that eddies briefly at the stile, we turn two ways, like marbles in a maze, and down both stairs at once, some headed in, some out of the city's gullet. Now we wait. Some read their damp newspapers as they wait. Some fumble with umbrellas dripping. One or two twitch to unheard melodies out of earphones. Here comes the F. We stream where physics says we do not fit. Those down in lucky seats pretend absence. They turn their eyes away, demure, while we, in turn, pretend we are not watching as we wait for them to rise so we can settle down into their humid seats. Now everyone is bobbing in a dark electric stream under the city's wire nerves and out for glimpses of blue light on platforms, out again, losing and finding. As they turn to find room for themselves, newcomers stream seamless, each face replaceable. We wait. Lexington Avenue, a flute. Someone loves Mozart. Young, eyes closed, cheeked with light down, a coin box at his feet. A man puts his times down to listen. Now we're pulling out and Mozart's gone. Gray pillars, one by one, flick past, and grave-like niches. Workers turn as we slide by them on their break. They wait. Steel and graffiti wash them in a stream of grinding colors. Now we're here. We stream to rise against the current, bearing down before doors close us in. They will not wait. Scattered like beads, we burst and spatter out through comb-like gates, each winnowed in his turn, past urine pools and soda cans. One thinks of Mozart, streams of clear water out of sweet springs flowing down where grasses turn with the weight of morning, one by one. My fifth poem was written the first time I came up to Massachusetts, where my firstborn son had married and was waiting to show us his part of the country now. My firstborn picks an apple. One day in apple country, on a small hill dappled with afternoon, the light stood still. Windfall about our steps dimpled the grass, eloquent in praise of things that pass, while overhead the season moved without haste, teaching a kind of patience sweet to the taste. 4 of us linked together combed that hillside, your father and I, you and your bride, sharing your single apple down to the core, ourselves whole as good fruit. Who could ask more than such an hour, such hands to hold, walking in apple weather, harvesting gold? And here is a very different poem called Rosaria in Early Morning. This is what's called a narrative poem. It tells a story, and I had heard this before and had also wanted to make it a short story. But again, like the first that I read, which was a story, this one did not want to be prose. It wanted to be a poem. Finally, it got its way. And here it is, a narrative poem called Rosaria on Sunday morning. And it's a story that really happened in my hometown again. Oh no, not dreaming. Clear as I hear you now on our way to Mass and the bells tolling, I heard him calling in the dark last night. Shadow, he called. I sat up in bed, the smell of madreselvas everywhere, heavy as the bunches he would bring when he came courting all those years ago. Not dreaming, no, I never dreamed of him, and seldom thought of him in all those years since I sent him away once and for all. As for my sending him away, I said all that I had to say then, as you know. More is nobody's business, though there are some in this town who may think otherwise. He and those honeysuckle bunches damp from his mother's garden, week on week, showed up on our front porch where Mama stayed, or Sarah, or Susanna, just to show that the Alvarado girls, even the ripest, would not be left alone with any suitor. You knew my father, how he never said outright what he could hint at while he chewed on a cigar, and yet he told me once, when there's no bread, cassava's good enough. Yes, from the start, I knew they hoped I'd take him, worn down by his scrubbed look. He was polite, spoke as if he'd been schooled better than most, but after crops and prices and the weather, not much was left to say. And in her way, his mother courted me with smiles and small talk, urged me to recompense a good man's love. Amor con amor se paga, people say, but love that you take unwanted is no gift, and if it were, why would one need to pay? That's all of it, whatever some may think. No quarrel, no advances to rebuff, no secrets to uncover, his or mine. I simply said one day it was no use his waiting for what wouldn't fall, when fresher fruit was out there for the picking at harvest dances and even in private pews. Before the rains, he left, and here I stayed. Odd how things happen. Married, after all, reared my 2 daughters, and one bastard son my late husband brought home, and then another, taught the town's children over 40 years, with few regrets, fewer, I'd say, than most, and with less to do penance for than many who'll kneel at the rail this morning for the host. He could have stayed, but no, he was the one who left my porch, the town, his mother's house, the farm, the island, all. If I believed in country superstitions, but I don't, I'd say he left the world itself last night. Why did he come, unhindered by the lock, in darkness, uninvited, and then call me Charo by the one name no one else called me? Why did he say it with a voice that rose out of a well of sorrow? And today, although I've opened every window wide to daylight breezes from the orange grove, the honeysuckle smell lies like a pall over my bed, as if a wall of sorrow shut out the town and everything that's in it, but bells, as they might sound, tolled underwater. And the strange thing about that story that became my poem is that not soon after this happened, that the voice turned up in her room, she learned that he had died that same night. And here is my last poem, which is a historic one. And it was written in honor of a Spanish galleon that came to Newburyport. Gorgeous boat that made you think of Spanish history right away. And I have the boat speaking in this poem. It is the boat's voice that you're hearing, because you know we poets can do anything. A Spanish galleon contemplates the future. Above me, sky, and down below, the stream. Loud on the wind that fills my swelling sails, a swarm of raucous seabirds dive and scream, circling the rigging and the churning wake, where they hunt their food and ride the gales. Do they speak in the exultant noise they make for the future, unknown and not yet real, but working to become? Under me, the current drags its weight against my keel, like chains pulling me home to Spain again. Wind and water keep me bound in two directions, toward treasures of the sea and the familiar soil that bred these men, my rough, ambitious, restless, ruthless crew. They also hunt money, adventure, land, and carry with them everything they've known, that heavy burden, poverty, the cross, the force of power in another's hand, reckless energy, the need to act alone, a taste for profit from another's loss. How will they see the stranger, a new race, another's food and customs, gods and speech, weapons and rituals, color, odor, face? How will that other see them, as if each were his own man, or as a faceless horde to be received with loathing and reviled? How will the future judge and then record Spain's juncture with the undiscovered wild? España, the word ripples with pride in its long history of art, design, books in which the words are jewels arrayed in a royal crown, or as each line of my body, calligraphy in oak, flows like a living being on the tide. Blessed by the Virgin's eyes, my gallery wears railings whose medallion squares evokes balconies and the gallant artistry with which the lines of Spanish verse are made. Maybe these sailors, as live transplants do, will take root where they anchor and at last earn what they seek to conquer, not through war, but through labor, the dream of something new, generous, risky, never seen before, more just and free than the retreating past. Thank you.